The line in that song, "Come on, my soul, don't you get quiet on me. You got a lion inside of those lungs." Thinking about it, thinking about that statement, thinking about what that means. To me, I think sometimes we operate like we have kittens in our lungs. We got Simba, not Mufasa, in our lungs. You're welcome. Everybody's welcome for that. All right. But operating in that way, what would it take for us to start actually living like the Lion of Judah is inside us, wanting to roar? What does that entail? Because if we're honest with ourselves, like I asked you guys to do the survey and the QR code, and it's now live on Facebook, and it'll be there, and we'll email it out, all those things. But what does it take to go from where we're at to where we know we could be and where we're called to be? What would it take? What needs to change? How do we need to be empowered? What do we need to hear from the Lord so that it is a lion inside of those lungs instead of a kitten? Your response might be, "Jared, I'm trying to roar, but all that's coming out is a squeak." Sometimes we go through that season where it's like, "I'm trying to be brave, but I'm not." "I'm trying to have it together, but I don't." And sometimes it's like, "Jared, I roar, but I think I'm roaring the wrong things." Like I roared and everyone ran away. Wait a second. That was supposed to be a protection roar, and I think I just scared the children. Right? So what does it mean? What does it look like? What do we need to have in our lives so that we can have the roar of a lion, of the Lion of Judah going on in our chest? To be the warrior lion, to be the protector lion, to be the defender lion, to have that going on in our lives. What is it kind of discernment needs to happen in us? What needs to change? What is focusing in our lives so that that is true for us? Because for a lot of us, if we think about where we're at, we're kind of squeaking. I think that question of how am I going to roar is echoing in King Solomon's mind when he becomes to the throne. That question of how am I going to roar, I am following King David. Right? You think you have dad issues. He's got King David as the guy he's following in his footsteps. It was great to have my dad preach and have the pulpit last week. That was absolutely fantastic. It's great to be able to like, "Dad, I need your help." You guys might say, "Hey, I need your help fixing this lawnmower." I can't do that. But you can't say, "Dad, I need you to preach next week." So there's that, all right? We have a very unique skill set, us Housers, and they are not the normal things. Sorry, Bo, that's what we get. But Solomon is going, "Oh my goodness, I got to live up to my dad." These are huge footsteps to fill. Huge. He's a warrior. He's a poet. He's good looking. He's got all the things going for him. He checks off all of the boxes. And I got to step into that. And so there's this beautiful conversation, this dream that Solomon has in this conversation with the Lord. 1 Kings 3, 5 through 15. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God asked, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." And notice there's not a caveat at the end of that. He says, "And I'll give it to you." He doesn't say that. He just ask me whatever you want. Miss that. I've read this 30 times. I've always missed that. But this time I was like, "Oh, He doesn't say I'll give it to you. He just asks me, "What do you want?" It's like a test. It's like, what do you think you need to fill your dad's footsteps, to be even a better leader than King David? What do you think you need? As a young ruler just taking over, like Solomon's got to feel pretty good about himself, too, at the same time. Like there's some hubris going on here. I'm king. It's good to be the king. Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among your people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you've asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will not give you a wise and discerning heart, so there will never be anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke and he realized it had been a dream. This interaction is amazing. And also, historically speaking, there's this power vacuum that happens precisely at this moment, precisely at this time, precisely in this location. A power vacuum. Think about where Israel is, where Solomon is located. He is in Israel. Huge empire to the south, Egypt. Huge empires to the north, the Hittite and Assyrian Empire. Huge empires to the east. I was doing it backwards. Anyway, there's a map in front of my face. And I'm trying to reverse it for you all. So if you want to know what this ADD person is thinking, there you go. And so Babylon is over in the east. And so there's this huge, I guess it's this side for you guys. Oh, yeah, say I can't do it. So there's this huge power struggle going on. And so if you're reading the scriptures and you're going, why is there the Israelites always in wars? Why are armies always marching through this place? Well, because the only way to get to Egypt and the wealth that Egypt had is to go through the roads that are in Israel. And the only way to go attack the Assyrian army from the Egyptians is to march up and go through Israel. And the only way for either one of those armies to go attack Baghdad is, guess what? Go through Israel. At this time of David and Solomon, there is a power vacuum where all three of those empires have imploded. All three don't know what they're doing. They have civil wars. They got stuff. And so you see this renaissance, this beautiful time of Israel coming to prominence and being able to have influence and power and have these wonderful years under the belt, under these kings, because all those other empires have receded. Now, you can think that's just happened chance of history, or you can think the Lord has been blessing them because of this moment. Now, if Solomon would have done what he was supposed to do and followed after God's heart the way he was supposed to, things could have been a little bit different, but Solomon gets a little wonky at the end of his life. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So how Solomon gets all of his money, and you wonder how he gets all of his riches, is he starts taxing those roads of these empires trying to do trade with everybody else. And their armies aren't strong enough at this time to go and say, no, you're not going to tax us. We're going to go do whatever we want. And that's how Solomon becomes so wealthy and so rich. If you wanted to know, now you know. That concludes our History Channel portion of the message. Actually, that was way more history than the History Channel puts out. So there's that. If you could ask God for anything, for one thing, if you could ask God for one thing, what would it be? Choose wisely. I feel like the Crusader guy on. If you could ask God for one thing. Bo knows what I'm talking about. We just watched those movies together. If you could ask God for one thing, what would it be? If you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, I would ask for this. And if you think about it a little bit longer, you're like, wait a minute, that could be bigger. It could be better. This week, there was 2 lotteries that were ridiculous. It was a $1 billion lottery and a $750 million lottery. I have a plan for how I would spend either one of those winnings. I didn't buy a ticket. So my plan's shot. But I have a plan. I know exactly what I'd do. I know who I'd hire. I know who I'd call. I know what I'd invest in. Boom. I know what's happening. I have a plan. So if anybody wants to gift me $1 billion, I know what to do with it. Just throw it out there. You know, hey. I have a friend in ministry who said that he wanted a Jeep, and if anybody wanted to give him a Jeep, he'd take it. And the next week, there's a brand new Jeep in his driveway. So I was just thought I'd try, right? But what would you do, right? What would you, like, we play these games of, if you could ask God one question, for one thing, what would you ask for? And sometimes they're kind of small. It's like, God, I don't need a lot of money. I don't need long life. I don't need all this stuff. I want this. Some of them crush our hearts when we start thinking about it. God, this is the desire of my heart. Some of the things are purely selfish. I'd like the $1 billion, Lord. I mean, I'd give plenty away, but I'd like the $1 billion. Lord, give me the Dodgers. I want the Dodgers. What's the thing that you would ask God for? The one thing. Solomon gets the Willy Wonka golden ticket. He gets the moment. Solomon, what you want? It doesn't say, he's not a genie. He's not, did you rub my lamp? Did you wake me up? Right? He's not blue. I got shackles on. Our God does not have shackles on. Just throwing that out there. No shackles on our God. With genie, the wishing, we would have, there's limitations and there's all those kinds of things. But the genie also has to respond and say, oh yeah, you asked for that, it's one of your three, here you go. God is under, and this is what I discovered this week in reading this, is God is under no stipulation to answer Solomon's request. He is not, what do you want? I want this. If Solomon would have asked for long life, for his enemies to be crushed, as God says, God would be like, wrong answer. Well, have a nice day and walk away. But instead, God goes, good answer. I'll answer that. And even more than that, I'll give you that, but I'll even give you more. I'll even give you more. What? Just that will rattle around your brain for a while to think about. That we serve a God who wants to give us even more. When we ask for the right things. Now, some of us are like, I think I've been asking for the right thing for a long time here, and it feels like this microphone's not on. I get it. But we serve a God who says, I'll even give you more. We're going to dive into wisdom, this discerning between what's right and wrong today. How can we have wisdom? Well, in our society, I think we confuse intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is when you have knowledge. Intelligence is when you have knowledge. Intelligence is knowing stuff. We value knowing stuff. That's why we want to send our kids to college. You need to know more stuff. Except anybody who's ever had a job with a brand new college graduate knows they know stuff, but they don't know anything. Right? There is knowledge without wisdom. Like they can't find the water fountain, but they know how to do all these fancy things. Like there is intelligence is when you just have knowledge. I know things. I pay good money for things. But I can't do anything with these things. Right? Intelligence is, and I'm not bashing intelligence. Intelligence is wonderful stuff. It's when you have knowledge, but if you don't put that into practice in some way, intelligence kind of just gets wasted. Wisdom is when you can tell right from wrong and then use it to make good decisions. Wisdom is when you can tell right from wrong and then use that to make good decisions. You take the intelligence, you smack it up against discernment, and poof, you have wisdom. It is the elixir of how we do this. Now, wisdom, you don't have to have a lot of intelligence to to have wisdom. You don't have to know a bunch of stuff. Some people innately are wise. They just can cut to the heart of the matter so easily. I feel like we talked about her a couple weeks ago. Deborah must have been really wise, sitting under the tree judging Israel. And there's been some people in my life that you're like, they exude wisdom. And you ask them a question, you're like, how in the world did you get that? I gave you apples and oranges and you made a whole fruit salad. Like, how did this work out? How did you get a kiwi? I don't even understand how you got a kiwi. And they ask questions that are so poignant, and they cut through the matter, and they see through your stuff, and they're wise. Intelligence helps in that, but it's not the whole thing. So what makes somebody wise and not just intelligent? I think the thing that differentiates between intelligence and wisdom is humility. Humility, not knowledge, is the key to wisdom. Humility, not knowledge, is the key to wisdom. And this is the key, I believe, for Solomon. Verse 7 says, now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in my place of my father, but I am only, underline, I am only a little child. He's a grown man at this time. I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. There's power in that, and power in that saying that to God. Lord, I'm only a little child. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm only this. Not, oh God, thanks for giving me this mission. I've got it from here. I've got the degree. I'll take it. Do you know who, sometimes, and this is not bashing our kids workers, but my mom with children's workers for years and years and years always said elementary teachers made the worst kids workers. Always made the worst. One, because usually they've been with kids all week long and they're a little burnt out by the time Sunday shows up and they need a reprieve. But they're like, I know this. I don't necessarily need to read the lesson. I don't necessarily need to prep. I don't necessarily need to do this because I've got this. And anytime we assume that we've got this when something God has called us to, we're going to have a problem. I'm just going to go ahead and let you know about that. Or there's an issue of brewing when you do that. When I assume I've got this, that's not wise. We're relying on our knowledge and not the humility of wisdom that will take us to the next level. Now, we have some incredibly humble workers here. Laura Warren is absolutely fantastic and spends a ton of time. She also spends a ton of time with her school children as well. She does a fantastic job. And I could go on and on bragging about every single one of them back there. But she's the only one in here, so I don't have to brag on that. But they do ours do a fantastic job with it. But it's hard, right? Because there's moments when you just think, I know the answer to this. Do you know, at baseball, sometimes the people who make the absolute worst coaches are the guys who played in college. Because, hey, they're 7, they can't turn a double play. We're lucky if they can catch, right? But I'm operating under what I was at in college, and I can't translate. I had a coach say, Jared, don't ever put me with those kids again. Can I have them when they're 15? I was like, sure, I need 15-year-old coaches. My child's 4. Well, it's going to be a while before you coach, my man. You got to figure that out because you take the intelligence of what I know and not the humility or not the wisdom of applying that to the certain situation, and you've got issues. We have this over and over again in our lives. When we assume that we have the answer, what does it look like if we come before the Lord and say, Lord, I think I know what the answer is, but I'm only a child. Because compared with whatever our knowledge is, whatever degrees we have, how much we've read, how much we've observed, how much we've done anything, compared to the Lord Almighty, we know nothing. Solomon has been trained better than anyone else could ever be trained to be king. And yet his answer is, I know nothing. I'm only a child. I don't know how to carry out my duties. Do you get that? Solomon has gone basically to the Harvard, sat under David his whole life, been under that tutelage. There can't be any better. How am I supposed to lead? Well, maybe your mentor should be a man after God's own heart. Okay, I'll follow him. Get to the moment of leadership. I don't know anything. Is that a slight on what David has taught him? I don't think so. I think it's true humility to say, this job is huge. The calling on my life is ridiculously large. And I don't want to screw it up. I'm only a child. I don't know how to do this. Sometimes we rely so much on our knowledge that we don't do the calling that God has called us to. Because we get to this point and we say, Lord, I'm only a child. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And that's exactly the point in which God wants to say, I'm going to answer your prayer. I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to equip you to be better than you think you can be. And that is in this moment. But we get to the point in this prayer and we say, Lord, I can't even ask you for anything because I don't want to do it because I know I'm not equipped. I know I can't have that purpose. I can't do these things. That seems a little too big for me. Well, if it seems a little bit too big for you, it's probably exactly what God is calling you to do. But we have to have the humility to say, oh, Lord, will you teach me? Not relying on our own intelligence, but what God is supplying for us. Knowledge is knowing what to do. Wisdom is knowing the right thing to do. But humility will lead your knowing to doing. I know that's a long sentence, but I like it, so write it down. Knowledge is knowing what to do. Wisdom is knowing the right thing to do, but humility will lead your knowing to doing. Don't confuse humility with laziness, and don't confuse humility with fear. Humility is still willing to do whatever needs to be done, even though I'm only a child. Solomon isn't asking for the cup to be taken from him, for the anointing to be removed, for the coronation not to happen. He's just humble enough to say, I need help. And it's got to come from you, Lord. Maybe in your life, you know you're facing an issue. You're facing something that you feel like God has called you to do. You feel like God has there's been a move in your spirit. There's been something that's been driving you to it. And you get to the point, you go, I don't know enough. That might be the best place for you to be. Not to not seek more knowledge, but also to seek the face of the Lord. Where Solomon goes wrong at the end of his life is he forgets the humility part. He starts making really dumb alliances, really dumb trade deals, really dumb things where he knows better. And they may on paper even sounded right. What he does is he starts marrying women from other religions. And instead of saying, if I'm going to marry you, you're going to come here and then you're going to worship Yahweh, and that's how it's going to be, he instead says, hey, sweetheart, we're married now. Oh, you've got this other God. Let's build a temple over here and let's worship them a little bit, just a little bit. And so he is expanding his knowledge, but he's also deteriorating the fiber of what Israel is. He's taking his knowledge, he forgets his humility that God is the one who put me here. And when his humility decreases, his wisdom decreases, and convenient decisions are made instead of the right decisions. As we see the fall of Solomon, we get to see him through his life as a young man, but we also get to see him as an old man writing. He writes Proverbs, and Proverbs is what it's supposed to be is a letter to teenage sons saying, boys, this is how you're supposed to live. This is how you're supposed to be known. This is even the kind of woman you're supposed to try to marry. Ecclesiastes or Lamentations is him going, I think it's Lamentations, going, oh man, I messed up this way, and I messed up this way, and I messed up this way. Oh, I messed up more and more and more. Right? You get looks in his life that are unlike anybody else's. Oh, you get from his dad, Psalms, you get David's happy, he's sad, he's happy, he's sad, he's happy, he's sad. But the same thing you get from Solomon, this beautiful look into his life. But the end of his life, he walked away from what gave him so much wisdom in the beginning, was that humility, combining it with the knowledge and the intelligence that he had. But that humility of, God, you've got to be leading this thing. I'm not good enough, strong enough, smart enough. And that's where all the bad decisions were made. In our lives, are we humble enough to say, Lord, I'm not good enough, strong enough, patient enough to raise these kids. I'm not good enough, strong enough, patient enough, smart enough to lead this family, to do this job, to do this calling. And you aren't good enough, strong enough, patient enough to do it. You aren't. But I got good news. That's the bad news. The good news is the Lord is. There's a lion inside of your lungs that wants to roar. Some of us come tired, beat up, frustrated, confused. Some of us are joyful, excited. And our excitement, don't let us forget who God is in our humility. That we'll forget our humility. And our hurt, don't let us forget who God is and forget our humility. I want us to be a church and a community of wise people. That when we have conversations in our cubicles or at the water cooler or at Noodles and Company with people or walking in the aisle at Mariano's, we have conversations that are filled with wisdom of the Lord. That when somebody else walks away, that, wow, that Brian, he had something to say. Wow, that Vince, he saw right through me. I haven't talked to anybody like that in a long time. You know the kind of conversations. I hope you have the kind of conversations I'm talking about. The ones that last, not the just. I watched a TV show yesterday, and the character said, was at a party for 5 minutes, and she was getting up and leaving. Where are you going? I filled my small talk quota for 5 years. Right? Like, what if we're not small talk people, but we lead conversations with wisdom? What does that change for you and for me? How does that change our relationships? I think some beautiful, amazing things can come from it. Pray with me. God, this morning we're trying to be people after your heart. We want to be people who crave wisdom and crave your touch in our lives. Lord, that we reject hubris and chase humility. Lord, we ask you to be with us and guide us, that you would give us a calling on our lives. Lord, maybe this morning we haven't thought of ourselves as being able to roar in a long time or ever. Lord, you, Lion of Judah, love us so much that you want to be with us and be a part of our lives, that you would roar in us. Call us to something greater, something better, something that moves us towards the kingdom of God and moves others towards the kingdom of God. In Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.